my talk is about making tech careers successful for everyone. And I initially gave this talk last week at a conference or 2 weeks ago at a conference that I was at. And it was a 25-minute talk, but I have pared it down here into like a 10-minute version. So suffice to say, there is a lot more I have to say about all of these things. So if anybody finds this interesting or wants to chat more about any of these pieces, definitely let me know, because I very much love to talk about this whole subject. And the reason it's a big deal for me is because I used to work in marketing, and I felt an itch to do something a little bit more kind of like logical. And I was like, maybe I want to be a developer. Like, I think I want to be a programmer because I kind of like code. It's like, I like the idea of how logical it is. And it's like, if something doesn't work, then you told it the wrong rules. Funnily enough, I was like, oh, it's, a much more objective field and like less opinionated, which later found out is completely wrong, but still enjoying it anyways. And so, yeah, long story short, I learned how to do it, and here I am. And I actually was able to make that career transition here at Elastic, but there were, some different roadblocks along the way and things that made it a little bit tough to do. And I just wanted to kind of talk through some of those things and some of those things that we can do to make it easier. And initially this talk was focusing on helping people become developers, but I want to kind of expand it a little bit more and think about, like, people moving into tech in general, and just why that's such a big deal. And so, first of all, you might be wondering, like, why do we care? Do we even want more people over here, or like, what is the reasoning behind it? And there's a couple reasons for why this is important, but to to pare down the presentation today, I'm only presenting just one of the reasons, which is because we talk about wanting more women and underrepresented groups on our teams. But if you don't reach those people when, they're in middle school and high school with various like coding camps or things like that, where are you going to find them? And the answer is not in tech. Specifically, these stats are for developers from Stack Overflow, showing that, majority of developers are straight white males. And it's just super interesting to me that we keep, talking about wanting more diversity on our teams, and, we want more women developers. And then we go, interview people who are currently developers, and then we're surprised when there's not more diversity there. And there's a lot of sort of systemic reasons behind why this is kind of the way that it is. And we obviously need to do something about that. But there's also some, more subtle nuances of things that we can do and things that we can change to help make tech careers more accessible and more appealing for these sort of groups, and just less of an obstacle. A lot of times when I tell people what I've done, their first response is, oh, that's so cool, I could never do that. And I just hate that. So why is that the case? Like, why are people like, I could never do that? And we're going to go through some of those roadblocks here. So a big one is not seeing people who look like us. And so the challenge with this is that, we're trying to learn to code. Like, when I was like, maybe I want to be a developer. Typically when I looked at who were developers, they were all guys. And most of them, were people who'd been doing it their whole life. I didn't see a lot of women who were currently in one career and learning coding on the side and trying to become a, programmer. And so now that I'm on this side of things, I do see things like that. But oftentimes those people are only telling their stories to other developers. And so, for instance, there's a whole organization called Lesbians Who Tech, and I had no idea about them because they're working with current developers, not necessarily lesbians who don't yet know they can tech. And so I think that's, super important to make sure we're sharing our story. And if you look different and if you feel safe and comfortable to do so, then please be loud and be proud, because people, you don't know who might be inspired by your story. And if you're looking at your team and you're only seeing people who look exactly like you, then call that out, because that means people who don't look like you are looking at your team and thinking that they couldn't fit in. Another roadblock is a limited view of what engineering is. And, typically we think of, oh, engineering, it's people who write a bunch of lines of code all day. And like, technically that is true, but engineering is kind of more than that. It's really the ability to solve problems or take inputs that then, you figure out the steps to get the desired output. And when you start thinking about it in that mindset, it kind of opens up a lot of different careers, and you stop thinking of people as like engineers and not engineers versus, or technical and not technical, and you just kind of start seeing engineering a little bit everywhere. For instance, how many, think about things like building a lesson plan, or fixing bugs in people's bodies. Like, all of these different sort of things are, they're all places that we're using, critical thinking and problem solving skills to make a recipe and make a way of getting from A to B. And so next time you're, looking for a new teammate and you're like, oh, I need someone who knows JavaScript or Go, try thinking outside the toolbox and think about, do you need someone who knows those things, or do you need someone who knows how to solve problems and can learn and adapt to different tool sets? Because you might find, like, one of the things that made me realize maybe I could be an engineer was that I really loved working in spreadsheets, and I really loved like using formulas and functions to take raw data and create dashboards. And I loved working with Zapier and, other sort of tools like Trello for automating workflows and things like that. And again, it's the same sort of brain power, just different syntax. Another roadblock is, if you're a developer, you've probably given this advice. I've, been a little bit guilty of it sometimes myself, but when, somebody wants to learn to code, a lot of times they'll, find out someone's a developer and they'll say, hey, that's really cool. How do I get started with coding? And they'll say, oh, just start coding in Google when you get stuck. And I understand this advice more now that I'm on this side of things, because yes, you really can Google all of these things and find things. But it's kind of like the equivalent of, if someone has no idea, where they are, and they ask you, hey, can you tell me how to get to Wisconsin, which is, a state here in the US? And you're like, oh, just drive down the street, and when you get stuck, ask somebody on the side of the road. And it's like, technically that could kind of get you there, but also that's super intimidating advice. Like, what kind of direction should I be going? Is there like a major highway I should be on the lookout for? Is it going to take a couple hours, a couple days? Like, and so my best advice for this is, when people ask you, hey, how do I, get started learning to code? I like to have a list of specific resources, and I'll actually share a link to this, but I have a Trello board that I use where I actually list out, here's specific websites you should, subscribe to their blog. Here's people you should follow on Twitter. Here's courses and tutorials that I recommend. And, if you want a boot camp, here's a boot camp that I recommend. And so I find that to be really helpful. And also just get to know, the people who you're mentoring and who are asking you that question, and see, are they like swim and, come jump in and help me when I'm stuck? Or is it like, hey, can you kind of ease me in the shallow water first? And then another struggle is not having the brain power to code after the workday. So I learned to program while working full-time in marketing. And let me tell you, that's tough. It's tough to use your brain all day and then try to turn it on again on nights and weekends to learn to code. And if you're a developer, or if you've done anything in that sort of realm of things, that you can't just brute force your way into fixing a bug, or adding a new feature, and your brain needs that sort of space to breathe and play. And we don't get a lot of that when we're, working full time and learning how to code. And so that's a really tough one. And I'd have days where I was like, oh man, maybe I'm not cut out for this, because I can't, figure this out at 10 o'clock at night. And I just have, mentors and people remind me that maybe I shouldn't compare myself to people who get to use their brain all day long to do stuff like this, because it's just hard what we do. And then one other big thing that kind of holds a lot of people back, I didn't have this, but a lot of people are lacking a supportive company job environment. And I actually wrote a whole blog post on this, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about it, but Elastic was extremely supportive in helping me transition in my career. I started in marketing and expressed a desire to learn technical skills, and that eventually turned into a goal to move into a technical role. And I was able to join the engineering mentor program. My managers in marketing gave me time to spend working with dev teams at Elastic to learn these skills. And long story short, it turned into a full-time role for me. So other companies do this. Zapier and Adidas, they actually have programs where you can apply for, where you spend half of your time working in your current role and the other half learning to code, with the intention of, after a certain period of time, you're able to move, full time into one of those roles. So this isn't really an action item necessarily for, I mean, it's a little bit of an action item for us here at Elastic, because I would love, like, Elastic has been very supportive, and I'd love for us to like make a more formalized sort of version of that. So if anybody's interested in joining me in that, let me know, because I'm interested in, I think Elastic is very supportive of it. It just could use a little bit more structure, like some of these places like Zapier and Adidas have. And so yeah, so that's a big thing. And then I'm just gonna wrap up here with my sort of actiony slide. And this is just things that we can all kind of do about it. And so notice the ones at the top, they're kind of like things that everyone in tech can do, even if you're in non-developer fields. Look for mentorship opportunities or create one. So whether it's, if you're a developer and other people who want to learn to code, like here at Elastic, I'm trying to revive the Learn to Code channel, where people who are in marketing or HR or accounting and they want to learn how to code, they can join that Learn to Code channel. And there's me and some other senior devs in there who are happy to answer questions and share resources and things like that. So yeah, so that's awesome. Please, if you're interested in learning to code, or if you are a coder and would be willing to help people who are interested in that, please join that channel. Related to that, help people understand that tech is more than just building an app overnight. So, if you're trying to tell people more about what dev things are, help them see that, it could be automating things. It could be, using tools like Zapier. It could be you work in marketing or accounting. It could be, building some really cool spreadsheets for your team. Or even, if you're not a developer, there's still kind of a misconception that if you want to work in tech, you have to be a developer. And I think there's, plenty of us out there who are doing so many other things. Obviously, we all work at a tech company, and we're doing, marketing and sales and customer support and customer success and like all sorts of things like that. So definitely help people understand that, if you want to work in tech, you don't necessarily have to write code. And then in terms of like, if you've been in tech for forever, you've been an engineer for forever, show your mistakes, please. Like it's really helpful for us who are kind of new to the dev side of things to see that, senior people make mistakes too. It's not just me as a newbie. And don't be a tech bro. And what I mean by that is like, don't make sort of like comments about like how there's one framework or there's the one right way to do things, because it can be really discouraging to people who are just learning and they're like, oh, I'm learning JavaScript, what's wrong with JavaScript? And then lastly, if you transition to tech or to a developer role, please tell your story, because we need to hear it, and not just people who are developers, but tell it to non-developers too. So that is all that I have. I'm going to post these slides. I'm actually going to post the full version of the slides in ERG Rainbow Stack, along with a link for the longer version of this talk in case anyone's interested. But yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to chat. And if you want to chat any more about this, please reach out to me, because like I said, I very much love to talk about this.